We should stop using the language that the critical race theorists use, because the critical race theorists admit that the whole point of their theory is to effect change, presumably to bring about some kind of equality, which we'll discuss in a bit. But in the case of critical race theory, it is about race. And as you can see from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, they have some thoughts about whiteness. And because they are racist, I mean, this is a race-focused thing, because they are race-focused and that's the lens through which they wish to see the world, that's the lens they wish you to see the world through as well. And that is captured in their terminology. The very framing of the language that they're using and the way that they present their ideas is to make you agree implicitly with critical race theory. And they do this on purpose. They know full well what they're doing. They're very intelligent people. They've written very thick books about the thing, and they are just explicit about their intentions. And because they obscure all of this in dense academic tomes, they know that the public don't read them. But I did, and it was boring. But it also was very illuminating, and so it's worth talking about their framing and the way they use these words. So the word that I think is most pernicious is the word whiteness, and this was exemplified by the Smithsonian a few months ago now when they put out a series of infographics like this talking about the aspects and assumptions of white culture and whiteness in the United States. This got a lot of people very hot under the collar, saying you can't say that hard work and the nuclear family are white culture, because it makes it sound, as I say, deeply insulting to non-white people. But what we mean by that really is non-Europeans, but even then it becomes more finely granular. The Smithsonian did apologise for this, say, look, hard work and rational thought isn't just white culture, but there is an aspect of truth to what they're saying if you are to replace the word white with something else that is also, in fact, more accurate. Suddenly this actually begins to make sense, because these are not something to do with your race, nothing to do with your physical person. These are about the behaviours that we exhibit and the common culture that this creates and the set of values that this common culture is based on. So when they say white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways that white people and their traditions, attitudes and ways of life have been normalised over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States, and since white people still hold the most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalised some aspects of white culture, including people of colour, you've got to ask yourself, what exactly are you trying to say? Because it's clearly not really about race, is it? I mean, if it was about race, why would it have all of these social prescriptions? Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence and autonomy are highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assume to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserve. Family structure. The nuclear family. Father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Husband is breadwinner and head of household. Wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. I don't think that's a fair analysis of what the culture you're trying to describe is. I think that the what you call white culture view men and women as equal and free to make their own decisions. It's just customary, and women prefer to be homemakers than breadwinners, and men prefer to be breadwinners than homemakers overall. Children should have own rooms and be independent, which is what you'd expect from an independence and autonomy valuing society, and there's an emphasis on the scientific method, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis, what we could otherwise call empiricism. And this is not something that is universally valued by white people. You can come to Europe and find that there are countries that are not ruggedly individualist. They are in fact highly collectivist and the sort of countries that create socialism. In fact, you can find that self-reliance is not something that is highly prized. Independence and autonomy are not highly valued. The individuals are not assumed to be in control of their environment. You can find countries where the wife, the children are not supposed to have their own rooms and are not really independent of the family structure. Like the Italian Mediterranean cultures are in fact very tight and familial. The children are not considered to be independent or should be independent of the family. And there are definitely cultures around the world that don't think of or value objective, rational, linear thinking or cause and effect relationships. I mean, you can find the old example of science being racist because it can't explain how the shaman calls the lightning in this South African university. And a chap at the back is saying this is not true. This lady who's presenting the argument is laughing at him for thinking that the shaman doesn't call the lightning. And is the humor is because science is so racist and backwards that they just can't figure it out. And that's not just white culture. That's not just white people. Again, there was two black people making the contention in that old video. But if we replace the word whiteness with something that is more accurate, because you couldn't replace this with Portugueseness. You couldn't say Portugueseness is rugged individualism, or the family structure where the children should be independent, or things like this. You couldn't really replace it with Russian. Russianness is the way that Russians and their traditions and ways of life have been normalized, where the individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence and autonomy are highly valued. That's not something you can say about Russian culture, I think. However, if you would say, instead of whiteness, Englishness, suddenly you have a much more accurate statement, because what this is a description of is English individualistic, meritocratic, Protestant work ethic having empirical culture. This is just the Enlightenment culture of England that had come to the 13 colonies that were founded by the English, and out of which the ideological revolution of the United States arose, which is just an example of English republicanism. I think it's the only example of English republicanism, really, that we have. But it's all very, very English. I mean, it's English speaking, it has common law. The revolutionaries themselves were drawing upon English traditions of liberty and constitutional monarchies. So the idea that you can just ascribe this all to white people is wrong. I mean, at the same time that the English were laying down the Bill of Rights of 1689, the French had an absolute monarch who was saying, I am the state. It's night and day examples of how countries should be run and how societies should be run. And so you can't just expand this to being white people. It's deeply inaccurate. But as soon as you say it, frame it in racial terms, suddenly it sounds exclusive. Because culture isn't something that is just fixed. You can go and integrate into another culture. You can learn their language, learn their customs, start acting like them, and make yourself amenable to the culture into which you've gone. But you can't change your race. You're always going to be black, or you're always going to be white, or whatever it is. Which is why people saw it as being deeply offensive, to say that people can't choose hard work and the nuclear family, or all of this. These are somehow annexed to white culture, and that's just not true, because they're not describing white culture, they're describing English culture. And as soon as you say it like this, suddenly the impetus to try and attack the culture goes away. You'll notice it's not about racial supremacy, and it's actually completely sensible. For in the way that they describe some of this is Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility speaking here, but it's very interesting how if you change the words, it suddenly doesn't make any sense to even complain about these things. This white dominant culture also operates as a social mechanism that grants advantages to white people, since they can navigate society both by feeling normal and being viewed as normal. How about this English dominant culture also operates as a social mechanism that grants advantages to English people, since they can navigate society both by feeling normal and being viewed as normal? Yes, I imagine English people in an English society would be viewed as normal, and if you think about it, how could you make it so that they're viewed it's not normal, or that people from other cultures would be viewed as normal as an English person in an English culture? I mean, I couldn't go to Uganda and be like, oh God, I could go to Uganda and complain that Uganda appears to be normal for Ugandans. They can navigate society and feel normal and be viewed as normal in Uganda. And I, as a non-Ugandan, would have difficulties navigating in a society of whom the customs I'm not familiar. I mean, it's just, you can't have it any other way. Like, how would you do it? So that you were trying to make it difficult for English people to navigate English society, or as difficult as a foreigner who has come into the society. Again, it doesn't make sense as soon as you start framing it in terms of ethnic culture rather than the lowercase w white culture. Like, it's not a racial culture, it's an ethnic culture. And this is not racially exclusive because it is bound up in a series of traditions and institutions rather than being predicated on skin color, which is why I'm sure that so many people of color have internalized some aspects of English culture, because they're looking at what appears to be a culture that is selecting for liberty and autonomy and sort of self-ownership, but this as being a result of like the Protestant work ethic for productivity and prosperity, and it seems to actively select for that. And you can read about this in books such as Why Nations Fail is a great example of the, they call it the inclusive model of English colonization compared to the extractive model of Spanish colonization, which is why the Spanish-speaking countries of the world, frankly, have got such problems and the English-speaking countries don't. But that's a discussion for another time, really. But this, again, coming back to the language that's being used, we've really got to start asking ourselves, what are we being asked from the framework of the sort of English heritage, common law, English-speaking countries that we have? Because if we agree that these are actually peculiar and particular aspects of English culture and Englishness, which they are, all of these things are very much, I mean, they're still alive and well in some parts of England now. These are English values, so it's not wrong to say that, and these are not exclusive to English people either, although you might be able to argue that the combination of these values put together are exclusive to English people. But either way, it doesn't matter because, again, they're just a series of values. These are a series of choices. As you see, individuals assume to be in control of their environment. Your choice matters. Autonomy is highly valued. You are an agent of whatever it is you're doing. You are the person who's responsible. And that self-responsibility is, I think, the source of the... And that self-responsibility is the source, in my opinion, of the prosperity of the English-speaking world. But either way, let's have a look to being what we're asked to. This person is asking us to be equal to them. As far as I'm concerned, because of my English cultural heritage, I think that this is a choice. I think they have chosen to be like this. And what I look at when I see this person is someone who looks humiliated to me. This person looks like they have been put through some form of ritual humiliation. They have had their head shaved, they have been muzzled, they've had their clothes torn off, and they've been graffitied over by whatever ideological perspective their attackers have laid on them. And it looks like they've been persuaded to do this to themselves and then parade out in public with a sign saying "No peace until we are equal." I'm sorry, I don't want to be equal in a lack of dignity with this person. I think that whoever has done this to this person, made them feel this way, has abused them. But as you can see, this person is exhibiting the polar opposite of what we can describe as English culture. Again, what we're not going to describe as white culture. That is the way that the critical race theorists would frame it. I, as an English liberal, look at this and say, well, this is just English culture, so we should call it that. But look at it. The individual is prime unit. Autonomy is highly valued. Assume to be in control of your environment. You get what you deserve. Well, I would look at that and say you're getting what you deserve, which is presumably scorn and ridicule. But you feel like you should be equal and deserving of the dignity of other people. Well, I disagree. And it's my cultural background that makes me disagree with you. I mean, what do you think this person's opinion on the nuclear family is? What do you think they think about the husband being the breadwinner and the wife being the homemaker and the children being, having their own rooms and things like that? Do you think they're family-oriented people? Do you think it's a person who's going to go back to their wife or presumably husband, whatever, and cook dinner? Like, hi, darling, how was the protest? It was great. Right, what would you like for tea? This is a person who rejects what they're going to call patriarchal roles. But this is something that most people do, and they just prefer it. It seems natural to them. And again, do you think that this is an objective, linear thinker? This is a person who believes in logic? Or do you think this is a person who believes that logic is a construct of imperialism and white supremacy? I would very much doubt if this person agrees with very much of what is listed here at all. In fact, they seem to be directly flouting the things that are listed as English culture, and they seem to be doing it with pride, and they seem to be demanding that we all become equal with them. And I think this is the source of Black Lives Matter having the anti-family deconstructionist view on their website until recently when it was taken off, because everyone realized, well, hang on a second, that seems to be the source of the problems in the black community. What are you doing? It seems to be entirely advantageous for children for them to be born in a nuclear family. Again, it seems to be selecting for certain things, which appear to be health and happiness and success, to be a part of a nuclear family. Breaking that up and making everyone equal in that regard seems to be giving everyone an equal share of misery. So, I genuinely think we need to start changing the terms that we use. I don't think we should say white. I think we should say European. I don't think we should say non-white. And European, again, is a broad term anyway. I would say English culture if you mean English culture. If you mean what they mean when you're talking about this, you should say English. This is not German, this is not French, it's not Russian, it's not Italian, it's not Bulgarian. It's English culture from the English colonies that created the United States. Own the word, because the word itself has power, which is why they're trying to subvert it. We shouldn't. I mean, I'm very sour on the word equal these days, because equal is, again, a very broad term that requires everyone to effectively cease any kind of behavior. I would say free. I would say no peace until we are free. And if we can determine the ways in which these people are not free, and to be honest with you, looking at the way they're behaving, if they are somehow capable of flouting all of the norms of English society and go out in public and still not be oppressed, not be molested, and capable and able of doing this, I would suggest that person is free. So I think that they should stop complaining. But this goes for any other kind of language that the radical left use. We should reject it all wholesale and use our own language, our own terms, in order to not fall into their ideological traps. Because as you are well aware, this is a form of subversion. This is a way of changing the way you think about things without you knowing that they have changed how you think, to get them to accept your framing. So if you would like to support our channel, you can check out our merch store, where we have lots of merch that is related to all this stuff, because I really think this is important. And I think it's important because they think it's important. They've been doing it for a very long time. They've been working on this, perfecting these methods for a very long time, and it is because they are so focused on it, and we are now where we are, with people rioting in the streets and lunatics going out and acting like this is something to be proud of or something. Then their job must have been successful. I mean, I think there's no decoupling the two things from one another, and I think that they have had a remarkable amount of success. But anyway, I won't go on any further, and I'll see you in the next video.